gentle words to shelter me. Your words were like a dream, but dreams could never fool me, not that easily.
Final Fantasy X-2. You know, it's a little weird to even be speaking those words. First of all, because this game is a sequel to a sequel. And second of all, because Square has always had this tradition of never continuing any of its Final Fantasy games. But this time they've gone and done it. They've made a direct sequel to one of their games, Final Fantasy X. As you probably expect, Final Fantasy X-2 picks up right where Final Fantasy X left off. The story starts about 2 years after the defeat of Sin at the end of the first game. This time around, Yuna is the main character. She's joined a group called the Gullwings, which is a trio of sphere hunters. You might remember spheres in Final Fantasy X were little spherical video recording devices that people used to capture moments of history. And in the wake of Sin's defeat, everybody is basically going around Spira looking for these spheres to reconstruct the history of the land. The Gullwings are kind of the premier sphere hunting group in Spira. They consist of Yuna, Riku, who's also from the last game, and Pain, who's kind of a tough new warrior chick. And you begin the game on the Celsius, which is the Gullwings' giant airship, and you basically have access to all the areas in the game from the get-go. You can go to just about anywhere that you saw in Final Fantasy X. During their travels, the Gullwings find a particular sphere that has some suspicious images on it of a character that looks strikingly like Tidus from Final Fantasy X. This, of course, is pretty intriguing to Yuna, and so they kind of embark on a quest to find out what's going on with the sphere as they're taking care of their other duties as well. The game is extremely non-linear. It's broken into 5 chapters, and within each chapter you can go to just about any location you want at any time. In each chapter there will be something different happening at each location. A few of the missions will be story-oriented, and those are required, but probably 80% or so are totally optional. Some of these optional missions contain some pretty important story-related conversations with characters, and then others just have sort of trivial mini-games that you can get good items out of. So it's entirely possible to finish the game only playing the few story-related missions that you have to play. But in doing that, you'll miss out on a lot of items and experience that'll make it easier to get through the game, and you'll also miss some pretty significant pieces of the storyline. The combat in Final Fantasy X-2 is really pretty fast-paced. The game uses the same active time battle system that you saw in a lot of previous Final Fantasy games. That means that monsters can keep attacking and basically performing functions while you're choosing your own commands. X-2 actually kind of takes active time to a new level because everything is so fast-paced that you really have to hurry to keep up with what the monsters are doing. Your characters work in kind of a pseudo-real-time mode because often when you issue an attack command, they'll attack almost immediately afterward. The fast-paced nature of the combat enables a sort of chain combo system where if you time your character's attacks so that they happen within about 1.5 to 2 seconds of each other, you actually get a big bonus to your damage. X-2 also uses a form of the job system that you might recognize if you've had a chance to play Final Fantasy V or Final Fantasy Tactics. In this game, you access your jobs through dress spheres, which are special spheres that give you new character classes that you can equip on any character. All 3 of the girls can use any dress spheres at any time, so you can have 3 black mages or 3 warriors, 3 dark knights at any time if you want to. As a character fights using any particular class, she'll learn more abilities using that class, and once she's mastered it, you can assign a new class so that she can start learning new abilities. By keeping an eye on which abilities your characters are learning and which classes they're using, you can make a pretty well-rounded party that ends up being pretty powerful. Graphically, there really aren't any surprises in Final Fantasy X-2. If you've seen Final Fantasy X, you've seen this game. It reuses a lot of the graphics from the previous game. Just about all of the backgrounds are reused. A lot of the character models, almost all of the monster character models. Yuna and Riku have gotten skimpy makeovers, and there are a few new high-detail character models, but for the most part you've seen just about everything in this game already. That's not to say the game looks bad, of course. For a graphics engine that's going on 2 years old now, it still looks pretty darn good. In the last few years, the Final Fantasy games have been known as much for their extravagant CG movies as they have been for their real-time graphics, and you'll find a pretty decent amount of that here. There's certainly not the volume of FMV that you saw in Final Fantasy X, but what's here is definitely up to Square's normal level of quality. Since most of the graphics in Final Fantasy X-2 are lifted right out of the previous game, you might be surprised to find out that the soundtrack is entirely new. This isn't exactly your typical Final Fantasy soundtrack. There are a lot of poppy, kind of upbeat fluff songs that fit with the game's tone, but it also has its share of somber, more reserved pieces that fans have come to expect. As you probably expect if you played Final Fantasy X, the voice acting in X-2 is pretty good all around. All of the actors that participated in the first game reprise their roles here. Overall, Final Fantasy X-2 is a pretty solid and entertaining RPG. It's got a lot to do, you've got a lot of freedom to do what you want when you want. Unfortunately, this freedom means that X-2 lacks the narrative focus of a game with a more linear story like Final Fantasy X. At times, FF10-2 relies a little too heavily on annoying mini-games. It would have been nice to see a little more dungeon crawling and other traditional RPG elements, but overall, X-2 is definitely a worthy attempt at making a true Final Fantasy sequel.